Welcome back to another episode of Heat Chat. I am John Devine. With me is Anthony Chang. Um, we've got some things to talk about, but we're kind of in the dead period. But Anthony maybe taking off a couple weeks, so we figured now's the time to catch up. So
we don't want to go too far
Anthony.
without an episode. We don't want to go too far without an episode, JD.
Yes, we know you'll miss Anthony. So we're looking at a roster. We're looking at a very full roster. We're at 17 players after signing Myron Gardner and agreeing to Exhibit 10 contract with Gabe Matson. We can talk about Drew Smith, who is no longer eligible for his two-way contract. And, of course, can they ever trade Terry Rozier in that contract? Let's start with Terry Rozier. Let's go top heavy. Terry Rozier, why would people want to trade for him? And, well, I think we can say why they wouldn't, but humor us. Why wouldn't people want to trade for Terry Rozier? Let's start with that.
Why wouldn't?
Yes. Outside of the fact that his numbers have been terrible.
Yeah, he's making $26 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not the max, but it's a good amount, and it's a high salary. His production has regressed a lot. He was one of the worst players in the league last season statistically, if you go by efficiency ratings.
I was going to say cratered, but okay.
Yeah, that's another word. And he's at the center of a federal investigation as well. That's ongoing. There's that too. So there's a lot going on with Terry Rozier. He's not someone that, the Heat gave up a first-round pick for him just a year and a half ago. A first-round pick they gave up for him, and now it's, you kind of have to attach a carrot to trade him to entice the team to take him at this point. And that's why he hasn't been traded yet, right? I think the Heat, in a perfect world, would like to get off the contract. Why would a team want to trade for him? I'm going to move on to the next question.
Yes.
He's in an expiring deal. So there's that. You could just like the Heat traded Kyle Lowry at the final year of his contract. The Charlotte Hornets took that contract. It was like, a little more than I think even Terry. It was like $30 million. It's 1 year. You get off of that, then you have all that money in space or just under the tax. You have kind of a cap relief utilization there. So there's one reason teams would want to trade for him is because he's an expiring deal. It's not multi-year money. You're not going to be tied into his contract for multiple years. But the problem the Heat are having in trying to trade the contract is, there was a report earlier this week from Jake Fisher, who does an excellent job covering the league. But there was a report that there was discussions between the Heat and the Wizards for a swap of Terry Rozier for Marcus Smart. In a vacuum, that sounds like a no-brainer for the Heat. Is Marcus Smart who he used to be 3 years ago? No. Is he a defensive player of the year who was 3-4 years ago? No. But he's also on an expiring contract, and he's making about $5 or $6 million less than Terry this year. And just a fresh start, right? The Terry era has not been great for him with the Heat. Kind of get a fresh start with Marcus Smart, a defensive-oriented player, might be able to help you. Cheaper contract, get you under the tax, which the Heat are trying to do. So it makes sense. Why would the Heat not want to do that trade? Which it was reported that the Heat front office could not come to an agreement that it was a clear upgrade. When I was told, they probably would have done the trade if it was 1-for-1. But the Wizards wanted draft capital. And when the Heat found out that they would need to attach a first-round pick or a second-round pick, whatever it was, they were like, never mind, right? They already spent a first-round pick to acquire Terry Rozier. They're not going to spend more draft capital, which they don't have much of anyway, to get rid of Terry Rozier. So I think because an expiring contract, if that's what they have to do and just eat the money and wait 1 more year, that's what they'll probably do, right? It's only 1 more year left on the deal. Because the Heat are hesitant to sacrifice salary cap flexibility and draft capital just to unload Terry Rozier at this point.
Okay, because, all right, so let's try this. In theory, he's a point guard, yes? I know they play him at 2 guard, but... Yeah.
He's a combo guard, but yeah, he's more of a point guard.
So looking at it, even if we thought he had a renaissance, who was in front of him at point? You have...
Davion.
Okay. You've got Tyler Hero, if depending on how you want to put that. You've got the rookie. So if you're lucky...
And you acquired Norm Powell, too.
Yes.
Other players will definitely be ahead of him.
So on that guard rotation, you're paying $26 million for a guy who would really, really have to show something to crack that rotation.
Yep.
I don't know how feasible that is. But we do know that they're trying to thread that needle and be fiscally responsible. If you want to be fiscally responsible, you're not giving it. Look, they tried it 2 years ago. It didn't work. They tried it 2 years before that. And that didn't work either at point guard. I guess I hate to say it, but isn't older point guard the way to go? You're trading, I don't know, you're trading the ability to get to the hole. You're trading the ability to really move the ball for stability, and he never gave you the stability that you needed.
Yeah, I think the Heat learned their lesson 2 years ago when they traded Kyle's expiring contract and a first-round pick for Terry Rozier, right?
Yes, but Kyle Lowry was the same thinking. Even when they picked up Kyle Lowry, it was
right.
We have an experienced person who can get us into the offense. Maybe can't break down people off the dribble, but we think he can jumpstart the offense. I think with Bam Adebayo kind of being able to jumpstart the offense from the half court a little bit, from his position, not a point guard, but he does have matchup advantages versus the people who are guarding him. You have that. You have Tyler who can do it somewhat. You have multiple people who can start the offense in an era of positionless basketball. So maybe that need isn't as great, but we know Terry Rozier hasn't been able to fill it since he's been here.
I also think there were two different mentalities, right? When you were making that trade of Kyle for Terry Rozier, you still had Jimmy Butler.
Yes.
You failed in your pursuit of Damian Lillard. So you're like, we're in a win now mode. Jimmy's contract is going to expire in a year or two. Obviously, we didn't know how bad that fallout would be at that point. They're trying to go for it now. Terry Rozier at that point was having a career season for the Charlotte Hornets, averaging 20 points a game. Maybe he's a guy who can help our offense. Poor man's Damian Lillard, right? Pull-up shooter, can play point guard a little bit, can play off the ball, can score, juice the offense, isn't a terrible defender. Maybe in the Heat system, he has a long wingspan. Maybe he can fit in the Heat's defensive system. There was a different mentality back then, right? I'm not saying the Heat aren't in win now mode. They always are. But there was a little more urgency at that point. Now you can see them going younger. They're building around a pretty solid young core. Half their rosters at guys 25 and younger. So I don't think they're in that desperation mode of like, we got to get off of Terry Rozier, dump a first-round pick, let's make an upgrade to the roster. They want to play their young guys, right? And I think that's what we're going to see. I mean, could Terry have a stretch where he plays? Of course. I mean, we've seen it. There are injuries all the time with this team, right? There's going to be guys in and out of the lineup, but it's going to be tough for him to crack the rotation for sure.
And with Spo, look, everyone gets a chance at some point.
Yeah.
It's just the way he plays rotations. Everyone's going to get a chance.
Sure.
But since we're saying everyone's going to get a chance, everyone means 17 people on this roster right now. That's a lot of folks.
That is.
So tell us about the two guys they signed, one to an Exhibit 10, and how they fit in. Or can they fit
Myron Gardner is the first one they signed right after Summer League. A guy who stood out for their Summer League roster. The Heat usually like to reward guys in their Summer League team who play well, and that's what Myron Gardner did. An older developmental guy. He spent the last, 2 years in the G League for the Orlando Magic's G League team. The last 2 seasons, was undrafted in 2023 out of Little Rock. Had a solid G League season last year, averaged 10 points a game, but really kind of got better as the season went on. Played really well in the playoffs, in the G League playoffs, kind of helped lead the Osceola Magic to the G League finals, and then played well in Summer League despite limited action. He had a finger injury in the California Classic that kept him out for most of the Vegas Summer League, actually. Then he came back for the final 2 games of Vegas, kind of picked up where he left off, played well, and was rewarded with a 2-way. Led the Summer League team in steals, impressive in his ability to get to the basket, solid 3-point shooter, can score. So we'll see. We'll see how he fits in. Again, he's an older prospect, not a guy who was undrafted this year. He was undrafted in 2 years ago. So he has some experience, but has never played an NBA game yet. So this is the first 2-way contract he signed. This is the closest he's gotten to playing in the NBA. So we'll see. Good for him. Rewarded for his productive Summer League. The second guy they added was on an Exhibit 10 deal, which is basically an invite to training camp. The Heat have one open 2-way left, so maybe he competes for that final 2-way spot. a 3-point shooter, 6'5" 3-point shooter out of Utah. This, Gabe Matson was undrafted this year. So he's younger. Shot 50-something% for the Warriors Summer League team this year. So he was on the Warriors Summer League team. So the thinking here is you lose Duncan Robinson, right? Not saying he's going to be Duncan Robinson, but you want to fill that 3-point void in the developmental system. Gabe Matson out of Utah. They're going to try to make into that next 3-point specialist, that comes out of the developmental program. We saw it with Max Strus, saw it with Duncan Robinson. They tried it with Cole Swider a few years ago. And now Gabe Matson is that next guy. So right now, they haven't signed Gabe Matson yet to the Exhibit 10. My understanding is that will happen at some point. But if you count Gabe Matson, they are 17 players. You're allowed to have 21 players during preseason and training camp on the roster. So they still have some openings. We'll see what they do. They have one open spot in their standard roster. If they decide to fill it, they have one open two-way. And then the rest they can fill out with Exhibit 10s or non-guaranteed contracts.
Now let's look at the roster implications. Which kind of contract can you go back and forth? And is it up to 50 games? Is that the limit?
Two-way contract. Yeah. You can be active for as many as 50 regular season games. The rest of your playing time has to come in the G League. Two-way players are not eligible to play in the playoffs. But they could be kind of two-ways are interesting because, Myron Gardner's got a two-way right now, but he can be swapped out at any time. So same thing with Vlad Golden, who they signed, to a two-way right after the draft in June. They can be swapped out today with no salary cap implication. It doesn't count toward the salary cap, doesn't count toward the tax. That's a good thing about a two-way. It's a pretty much a developmental contract that allows you to get some NBA playing time, but a lot of their time mostly is going to be in the G League developing. Gabe Vincent was on a two-way at one point. Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, all those guys were on two-ways at one point before they were moved to standard contracts. So, it's an interesting contract. Again, there's not a lot of security there, right? Because again, you can be swapped out any time if you don't play good in the training camp or in the preseason. Gabe Matson can take Myron Gardner's two-way for all we know. So, for now, Vlad Golden and Myron Gardner are two-way players, and again, they still have one open slot, which sometimes the Heat like to keep one spot open as a carrot for those Exhibit 10 players in camp in the preseason, kind of as a competition, right, for who's going to get that open two-way spot. So I would not be surprised if they keep one spot open just to, create that competition in camp.
Well, the thing we can say is the Heat, as much or more than any other NBA team, will promote you if your playing time or if your play warrants.
No doubt.
So it's not like these other places where they give it to you and you have no shot at making the squad. You have to applaud anybody that lets you. It's a meritocracy where you go, you earn it, you get it. They do it as well or better than anybody else. So we were talking about point guards before, and we left one out, and that was Drew Smith. Yeah. Drew Smith, if I'm not mistaken, was it a popped Achilles last year or was it his ACL?
Achilles.
Okay, so he's coming back from an Achilles, which, look, 20, 30 years ago pretty much meant the death knell of your career. Now with advances in training and medicine, but it's still hard if you're a point guard and you're trying to work on explosion and pushing off and getting to the hole or moving laterally to play defense. How much do you think this is going to change his game? And how would it change his role for the Heat if he makes a full comeback?
Yeah, we'll see, right? I mean, Drew Smith has been through a lot in his career. He had a significant knee injury a few years ago that he had to return from, and he did, right? He put in the work. He was playing really well for the Heat last season, was basically like on his way to becoming a starter.
Wasn't he the closer? Didn't he play a lot in the fourth quarter? Yeah. Yeah,
he played I think it was 6 of the 7 fourth quarters leading up to his season-ending Achilles injury. He was playing big minutes, just reliable. Really was shooting the three ball well, not committing turnovers. Very, very good defender, right? On-ball defender. He was becoming a really reliable piece. I mean, he's a guy that if he would have stayed healthy, Terry Rozier probably would have been out of the rotation a lot earlier than he was last season, right? If Drew Smith is available. So yeah, that was a tough blow, not only for Drew Smith but for the Heat last season. Now, how will we look after the Achilles injury? That's a big question, right? Again, he's been through a lot. There's not his first serious injury over the last few years. He's had multiple now. He's again returned from them before, but Achilles is a big one. And I think he's supposed to be ready for camp, but I don't think that's been, there's no guarantee yet, right? It's depends on the next month and a half goes. But one thing that did change, things for him is the thinking was that he was going to be the third two-way guy. I mean, as even a week ago, I think all of us covering the Heat were reporting, the expectation is Drew Smith is going to be the Heat's third two-way player because he is technically eligible for a two-way. Guys with fewer than 4 years of NBA experience are eligible for a two-way. He has 3 years of NBA experience. He can sign a two-way. But I found the rule on, I think it was Tuesday that I reported. We were the first to report. He is actually not eligible to sign a two-way with the Heat because there is this rule, which I don't even know if it's come into play before because you don't see guys fit this criteria, but you can't sign a two-way in 4 separate seasons with the same team. And he has already done it with 3 separate seasons with the Heat. So he is not eligible to sign a two-way with the Heat this year. They would have to sign him to a standard contract. And, unless they dump Terry Rozier or make a trade, he would have to fill that final roster spot. And it would add to their tax bill because, again, a standard contract counts for the tax, counts for the apron. So I don't know if he will do that. I guess there's a way around it if he has like non-guaranteed, if you make it non-guaranteed for most of it and maybe just prolong the decision and take him into camp on a non-guaranteed contract and decide based on how he looks after the Achilles injury if you want to keep him and sign him to a standard contract. But the thinking of, you can just make him a two-way player, see how he looks after the Achilles injury, and we'll go from there. No, they're going to have to get him on a standard contract because he is not eligible to sign a two-way with the Heat. He can sign a two-way anywhere else, but just not with the Heat.
So I'm hearing you talk about Drew Smith, and we're talking about his pros and cons. And here's a question for you. How much different would the season have been? Would they have made the Davion Mitchell trade? And 2, how much do their skill sets overlap? So even if Drew Smith is healthy, is it a matter of fit now because they play the same way? Do you want multiple guards who do the same thing? If we're saying that they have the same skill sets.
Right. I think, will he be in the opening night rotation based on the roster right now, the way it's constructed? Probably not, right? But depth is important. We've seen it, right? I mean, we've seen stretches of the season where 4 or 5 guys go down. Maybe someone's not playing well. Like, look, we thought Terry Rozier was going to be the starting point guard for the entire season. And by mid-season, they were looking for any way to get him out of the rotation, right? Drew Smith was about to take his spot. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Davion Mitchell, but who knows? You just don't know what's going to happen. So I think any depth you could have at the guard spot, especially for the Heat that really don't have a lot of like true point guards, guys that can run an offense. I think it is important. So I think yes, what he is his role going to be as big as it was when he went down with the injury from the jump? Probably not. But could he work his way into the rotation based on circumstances? I definitely think so. I think Spo trusts him as long as he's healthy and is close to the version that we saw last season before the injury. I think there's definitely a need for a guy like that, especially if it's, if they can find a way to get him on a minimum contract and maybe shed other salary to make sure you're under the tax. Because one thing I do know is the Heat are going to be under the tax. They're not under the tax right now, but they're going to be under the tax by the end of the season. So again, signing Drew Smith to a standard adds to the tax bill and makes it even harder to get under the tax. That's the problem. They'll have to figure if they sign to a standard, it means they either made a trade to shed salary or they have something in mind where they can shed enough salary to still get under the luxury tax.
Now, you never answered my what if question. And my what if question was Drew Smith is healthy last year. Do they go out and get Davion Mitchell?
It's interesting. Opinion? Yeah, I still think they probably do because they needed. They really didn't have a lot of point of attack defenders last year on the perimeter. I think that was a weakness. Drew Smith was like one of the only ones. Drew Smith and maybe Haywood Highsmith. So I think the fact that you can get Davion Mitchell in a deal like that, I think they probably still would have done it. But if you remember, I think the initial version of the Jimmy Butler trade did not even include Davion Mitchell. It included PJ Tucker. Remember? And then PJ Tucker didn't agree, and then PJ Tucker got shipped somewhere else. And then the Raptors were like, Raptors going to get Brandon Ingram, so they need to shed money, and then they included Davion Mitchell instead of PJ. It was a weird the way weird how that played out. So I think the initial version of the trade didn't even include Davion, and then Davion was just kind of thrown in to facilitate the trade. It ended up working out for the Heat, right? I mean, Davion Mitchell ended up being maybe the best player in that trade last season for the Heat. I don't think anybody expected that, but that's the way it played out. So I think it was such like Davion Mitchell was almost like a guy that just helped make the math work in the deal to get it done before the deadline. That I don't know if they would have put enough thought into it of like, oh no, we already have Drew Smith. We're not going to take Davion Mitchell.
You know what? I forgot all about that. So
yeah, it was. I kind of forget how the exact order, but I remember it was PJ Tucker at first, and then the Raptors kind of said no, we got to trade. You know, it was like then they included Davion Mitchell. It was. They needed to adjust some things to make the math work and allow them to sign Ingram or make the trade for Ingram with the Pelicans, which happened like I think a few hours later after that trade.
Well, sometimes you luck into the deals.
Yeah.
And so good for them. Good for Davion Mitchell, and most importantly, good for the Heat. So as we're going through and we're starting to wrap up, let's talk about when camp breaks. So as Anthony, maybe we can follow Anthony on X and see where he is and see where his mini travels take him while he takes a couple weeks off. But what are the major dates remaining? Is there anything special we should look for in between? Do you anticipate any movement before camp starts?
I definitely think. Yeah, not major movement, but I definitely think they'll fill the roster. You know, with Exhibit 10 guys, maybe, you know, you see a Taylor Rozier trade. At this point, I don't expect it because it's hard to see a team taking on that deal without the Heat having to include something else to make it worth it for that team. But I think they'll fill the roster with Exhibit 10 guys. Maybe they sign another two-way. We'll see what happens with Drew Smith. The NBA schedule will come out some point in mid-August. But yeah, this is the quiet time. This is the quietest time of the NBA offseason. Now until pretty much mid-September. Heat Media Day will be September 29th. Camp opens September 30th. And then things will obviously pick up. So for the next month and a half, it's really a quiet time of the NBA offseason, and all eyes are pretty much on football at this point.
There's all eyes on football. If people get in trouble, people do dumb things.
Yes.
We had, what was it? Marcus Morris Sr. was arrested down in Miami last week. You know, things happen. We're not going to go into them, but things happen. But if they do, or if you see movement with the Heat, come on back here. We'll be here to cover it. We're going to give Anthony a little bit of well-deserved time off. We're going to prep for football season, but basketball season is becoming just like the NFL, where it's a year-round enterprise. Stick with us. We will be here. Until next time, don't ask me what date next time is, but until next time, I am John Devine. This is Anthony Chang, and we look forward to it. Thank you for joining us here on Heat Check.